Welcome to the Cyber Insights podcast, brought to you by the ISACA Greater Washington, D.C. chapter. I'm your host, Jim Wiggins, and I'm joined today by my co-host, Mr. Altan Bulut. And our guest today is Dr. Sandra Fonseca. We'll be talking with Sandra about the topic, building strong data management foundations in cyber programs. Let's get into the episode. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Cyber Insights, the ISACA-GWDC radio show and podcast where artificial intelligence, cybersecurity, IT audit, risk management, governance, and privacy converge. I'm your host, Jim Wiggins, and I'm joined by my co-hosts, Mr. Altan Bulut. Always great to have you here, Altan.
Thank you, Jim. I'm excited to be part of this and looking forward to the conversation.
Absolutely. Today, we're diving into a topic that sits at the core of every successful cyber program, building strong data management foundations. As organizations increasingly rely on data-driven security operations, the structure, quality, and governance of that data has never been more important. We're honored to be joined by someone who brings deep expertise across cybersecurity, information systems, and project management. Our guest, Dr. Sandra Fonseca, is a professor of computer science, cybersecurity, and IT project management. She's a former data architect, longtime academic leader, and an active contributor within ISACA, and she's at Puerto Rico and PMI's Puerto Rico chapter as well. Sandra, it's a pleasure to have you with us. Welcome to the show.
Good afternoon. A pleasure and an honor being here with you this evening. Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Hey, Sandra, maybe what I could ask first off before we kind of delve into any of the kind of data management discussion, could you maybe just spend a quick moment and just, give us your 30-second elevator speech, or your 60-second elevator speech? I try to articulate kind of your background, but what does your trajectory of your career look like over the last decade or two?
Right. So I worked for 27 years at various Puerto Rico government agencies. 15 of those years as a CISO for a finance and savings institution serving the government employees of the Commonwealth of Puerto Rico. I also serve as a database administrator. I got an early retirement and then moved to the States and worked for 2 years as a data architect for a DC agency. I've also been teaching for 29 years now, right, at all levels from certificates, right, associate's degree to doctoral programs in all modalities, right, ground, hybrid, remote, and online. And as you mentioned, I am a strong advocate of volunteering and serving for professional organizations. I see myself as a bridge, right, between academia and the industry. And also, I love volunteering. I say I'm a happy volunteer for the Washington, D.C. chapter. I've been volunteer on and off since 2019. And again, as I work in security, I had the golden opportunity. It was a challenge, but now I see it as a golden opportunity in 1998 to launch a system security office. Back when, right back in the time where executives were not as flexible or didn't have the vision or the need to justify and fund a cybersecurity office. That was prior, right? The Enron collapse, the WorldCom, Tyco, Palmlat, right, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So for me, back then it was a challenge, but it was an awesome opportunity that I can now share with my students. And I've seen, right? I've seen the evolution, for better or for worse, of the cybersecurity, the IT audit, risk management, and even project management. There's a strong need, and I'm going to cover that in our discussion. There's a strong need to raise more user awareness in proper use, procurement, and preservation of data in projects, right? The history, the knowledge that is produced through programs and projects, right? There is kind of the belief that is not needed to be preserved, when it's actually the contrary. It becomes, right, a very important and valuable information history of the evolution of the organizations.
Awesome. Awesome. All right. Well, thanks for that background. I appreciate it. Let's delve in a little bit into the topic of the day, right? Or the topic that we're here for. And that's obviously talking about data management and some of the foundations. Sandra, when we talk about data management foundations, what does it mean to you, or what do you think it means in the context of today's cyber programs? Can we start there?
Yeah, as I mentioned, right, and I want to start by quoting the opening statement of one of my doctoral students. Like 10 years ago, he's going to be featured in January's data privacy event, our virtual conference, Dr. James Barker. His opening statement back in 2008 was two words: data matters. And that was non-negotiable because he's a data governance, right, expert. He has worked for over 30 years in the field. And his opening statement is very actual today, more than ever, right? Data is power. Data is worth money. And as I always mention in every cybersecurity course I teach, right, that in the end, one of the core objectives of cybersecurity, risk management and control is to preserve the integrity, the privacy and the security of data, especially in this, right, in the era, right, that where we are working in distributed environments, right? We're working right ground, right, in a typical data center, right, infrastructure or mobile operations, cloud platforms, and now AI, right? Where AI is here to stay, right? So now we have an additional platform that, yes, there's benefits associated with these platforms, right? The opportunity, right, to it serves more, right, diversification, more business opportunities, right, growth opportunities. But with those opportunities comes risk, right, threats, challenges, not only from the outside. I always say that most of the times, right, the threats come also from the inside, and sometimes it's it's not do it, did on purpose. Like, sorry, did on purpose. Sometimes is having the false sense of security, right? Sometimes we rely more than we should in the configuration of our systems, right? In the right, in our devices, the rules, right, the parameters that are being set, that are configured in the systems, those are good. But as long as we are connected, right, our systems will be exposed, our data will be exposed, and is a valuable asset, right? Data has been deemed as one of the most valuable assets for any organization, preceded only by human resources. Right? We'll still number one. Thank you, right?
Yeah,
So, right,
absolutely.
Terminator judgment have not happened yet. Thank God. Yes, Altan.
Yeah, very interesting point, Sandra. I really appreciate that. So, when you think about those risks, like as they emerge, as they become more complicated. So, how do you see in that landscape the role of data governance in terms of being a non-negotiable aspect for organizations looking to further their cyber maturity endeavors?
Oh, maturity, right? Corporate maturity is something that has to be taken more seriously, right? It should not be taken for granted. Every organization must conduct a maturity, right, exercise, right? Measure the level of maturity at least once a year, based on my experience. Because when I did the exercise as a data architect, my team was like a number one, right? Up on the scale up to five. And when I left, they were slowly transitioning to level two. So it's something that especially large organizations, They
Mm,
must not take for granted we have a governance structure. No, because of the complexity of the organization, right? The size of the
mm,
organization,
mm,
that should never be taken for granted. I always say that if systems are interconnected,
mm.
things will happen. Right? Breaches
Right.
will happen. Data will eventually going to be compromised. What we don't know is when, how, by whom, but we must be ready. So the
Yeah.
governance structure should not be written in stone, right? Those are living artifacts that should be updated, right? Should be constantly updated. User awareness and trainings, drills. Drills are very, very important. And sometimes, right,
Mm.
they're taken for granted, and that puts organizations at risk.
Yeah. Very, very good points. So, Jim, you want to follow up on
Yeah,
that?
absolutely, absolutely. So, okay, so we've talked a little bit about your background. We've talked specifically about the role of data governance and some fundamental concepts around data management. Um, let's talk a little bit about your experience as a data architect. I know you talked in your intro that you've done a couple of years as a data architect. How has that shaped you? You maybe talk about that for a moment and kind of tie it into how it's influenced your thinking with regard to obviously the education that you're involved with in terms of teaching, but also just in terms of how you approach how the organization should manage its cybersecurity programs. Any thoughts about that?
Yeah. So when I started, and that's the way I always operate as a manager, right? When we assume a role, managerial role, you need to conduct an assessment. So the first thing I ask as a data architect, right? Data, right? Do you have an inventory of the data landscape that we're working with? How many databases do you have in production? How many of them? The applications, how many do you have in production? How many are in sunrise or in sunset? And I was shocked with the response, right? We have an approximate known of 750 databases. And I was like, what do you mean approximately and known? Right? That concerned me. That concerned me. But then as I continue working, and those are the threats and the challenges of big organizations, right? The big corporations, that it should be expected, right? To have applications that we believe that they're on sunset, that means that they will replace like legacy and replace with the new ones on sunrise. But because of the complexity of operations of distributed data centers, we might think that they went on sunset and they were shut down, but they remain active. The same in networking. I've been in audits when we ask, right, for the networking diagram, the networking landscape. How many servers do you have? Physical servers. How many virtual servers do we have? And right now it's no longer a surprise to me that they don't have that number. Sometimes they have the number of physical databases, right, servers in production, but now the virtual. Same goes with data repositories. And another thing that I've experienced in projects is at the time of conducting user acceptance testing, right? Accreditation, right? And acceptance. It is very, very important to make aware projects and users, right? The testing teams, that when you're dealing with live data, with real data, you must replicate the exact security parameters, right? And criteria that you have at the production level. Because I had to deal with several breaches, internal data breaches, and when we, right, conducted the root cause analyses, right, we went down to data repositories that were kind of replicated for testing purposes, and they remain there. So, and that's where data governance comes in, right, to manage and procure data through the entire life cycle from its inception, right, or right when data is introduced into the system, make sure that it's valid, that is not garbage data, that is valid, usable data, right? Because not only it presents a risk at the time of application processes and transactions, but also is a waste of storage area. We have to make sure that is usable, that is reliable, that is private and secure up until, right, again, disposal. Make sure in data quality that whenever replicating or right, creating a sandbox for testing, we need to also consider security considerations. And at a time of data disposal, it's not just purging data, right? We need to go back to the policies, right? To the governance, right? Depending on the nature of the organization, sometimes you need to keep the data like forever. So you need to create an inactive repository, conduct an e-discovery, that is the data that is supporting any legal, right? Any legal issues, right? Criminal cases, civil cases, HR cases. So those needs to be preserved, and those becomes, right, not inactive data, but a digital evidence chain, because then they will have legal implications. So that's why
Yeah.
it's more critical than ever to have a strong data governance program in place.
Yeah. So, like you mentioned a lot of points that, yeah, so Sandra, you mentioned a lot of points that organizations apparently still struggle with when it comes to data management and security aspects of it. So, again, like coming back to the question, like, how do you see some of the better ways to structure cybersecurity education to make sure that maybe the next generation of practitioners will not repeat the same mistakes? Do you see a reliable way to
Yeah,
put that into curriculums that will have some level of impact on people's practices down the line?
yeah. Many universities have heard of the industry, and they're transitioning from the theoretical standpoints and simulated, right, like exercises or assignments, to now applying the, right, using the applied experience, where the, right, we're contracting third-party providers to have, right, we're working with simulations, but they are reflecting the real world, so that students will encounter issues, risk, threats, attacks in a simulated environment, but that will be a reflection of what's happening in the industry. And they will need to react, they will need to, right, implement and configure as if they were network managers or security administrators. They need to provide the response, they need to make the changes and report them, right? Same way as if they were active in the industry. And that's the applied experiential approach. And many
Mhm.
universities are transitioning to that approach, right? To have them ready. Even, right, we are aligning the curriculum with professional certifications.
Awesome, awesome. Okay, Sandra, so let's dig deeper into the main topic, right? So, you've kind of already alluded to the fact that there are certain kind of processes and practices that, data-driven cybersecurity programs have to have. We talked a little bit about governance. I heard you talk about quality. I think you alluded to kind of like classification or at least inventory management so that you know what's
Yes.
going on. Um, I'm going to jump ahead one question and then Alton will come back and ask you another one. But so, like, when we talk about data quality and we talk about data classifications, where do you think that cyber programs typically go wrong in terms of trying to implement these ideas and these foundational practices and processes? And then how ultimately would, organizations maybe best try to address those kind of problems in terms of some kind of solution? Any thoughts on that?
Well, we need to work in coordination. We need to integrate, right? We cannot work in silos, right? Cybersecurity go in one direction and IT in another direction and operations in another direction. this is the time that we need to work in the same direction and integrate. Similar in project management to the DevSecOps approach, right? To integrate development, security, and operations within the same, right? In the same project since its inception. And so that we cannot assume, right? Make no assumptions. This is the era where making assumptions that everything is in place puts us at risk, right? To think that we need to constantly check out the governance, check parameters, right? Be always on the lookout as to what is happening and emerging, right? The threats that are emerging, so that we have, right, a quick, right, response in place and adapt, react, and act.
Yes, so great point. So let me like maybe step back a little bit when you look at organizations that are looking to develop their data management plans to support cybersecurity. What do you see as some of the most important or critical first steps that have to be taken to make sure that they're robust plans, that they make sense
We
for
need to
various
conduct
sizes of organizations, not just for like big enterprises, but in all sizes of organizations.
There are frameworks that can help, right? Organizations, even the smallest organizations, like the DEMA framework, COBIT framework. I always say is not the virus,
Hmm.
is our own, right? Is a very comprehensive structure that you don't need to use it as it is, right? You just adapt all the portions and control structures that applies to your organization. Even small organizations, you need to have, right, some sort of control structure in place because you need to protect. Uh, in Puerto Rico, I read small, right, ice cream parlor. They operated mostly from their social media, right, groups and pages. They accept orders from the social media, and their pages got hacked, and they literally had to start all over again. So that's an example of a small business owner that, right, relies on on social media, on the cloud platforms, and they don't have, right, the right controls in place.
Yeah,
So there are models like the DAMA model, COBIT model, right, the risk IT model, right,
yeah,
that applies, started from the small business owners to large organizations, but there has to have some structures in place.
yeah,
And I always say to small business owners, professional organizations can be of great help,
yeah,
because they sometimes, small business owners, they don't even have the budget, right,
mm,
to hire third party providers. But if they reach to professional organizations, perhaps they're going to get the help that they need, right, to
yeah,
harden their system controls and protect their
yeah,
data.
yeah, absolutely. But for some of the more like smaller firms, like you mentioned, like ice cream shops, do you think that might be an overkill to prescribe COBIT or some other frameworks like that for like a three people company that are still concerned about their data? They want to do something that makes sense, but they don't have a governance person on board, right? So
Yeah, as
what do
they
you
as they
suggest that they
mentioned
do?
on the news, right? It's a hard lessons learned, right? Not to trust their systems, right? To protect, change the passwords constantly, right? Have some sort of encryption in place, right?
Mm,
That kind of awareness, right? Many small business owners, they don't have that knowledge. So
mm,
perhaps communications. This is a time where communications, right? Um, Newspapers, right? Newscast, podcasts like this one can be of great help to those that really need that help, but they don't have the knowledge and they
yeah,
don't have the means, they don't have the budget. And
yeah,
as they mentioned on the news, right, they learn it the hard way.
yeah,
So that could be some sort of community service that
yeah,
we professional organizations can be of great help to them, and the news as well.
yeah, yeah. Perhaps hopefully podcasts like this one would help. Anyway, so coming back to the larger organizations, maybe like how do you see the role of project management frameworks and the landscape of like data governance and to sustain, launch and sustain those initiatives around data governance in
I
terms
always
of like,
say,
yeah.
I always say in projects, and right now I'm teaching one of the courses. I say, same way that we use the layer approach to network administration and cybersecurity, they also have to be a layer approach to data management, including projects, right? Since its inception, since the planning stages, right, we have to exercise. I always say we have to exercise due care and due diligence, right? When managing data, when managing systems, and have a control structure in place. And that's why I see DevOps and DevSecOps that should be in place in every project, not only IT solutions, because in every project we're going to be using data and we're going to be using information technology, including AI tools, right? PMI has its own AI tool already, right? To assist project managers and project teams. We have collaborate, there are collaboration tools. So there's a lot of data. There are a lot of transactions that are right that are happening electronically and in distributed environments. So it's important to make all teams aware, right, of as for their responsibility in protecting the integrity and correctness of data in every process and preserve that data.
So
Did
Sandra,
I
that
answer your question? Did I answer your question?
Yeah, yeah, I'm satisfied. Thank you.
awesome.
You're welcome.
All right, hey, so let's talk about the role. Okay, so we've talked about like frameworks that might be used. You cited a couple of them that organizations might use to kind of establish their data governance. You've talked about the role of like project management and how that can help kind of articulate requirements and manage, outcomes. What in your estimation, what role does like, most organizations today have like risk management disciplines that they're currently implementing? And I'm wondering, does that risk management discipline provide any form of information or education to help strengthen these data foundations that we're talking about? And if so, can you maybe talk for a moment about like what that looks like? Does that make sense?
Can you repeat the question?
Yeah, yeah, no worries, no worries. So like, what I was trying to do is I was trying to articulate it is that, we talked about, project management's role in trying to help data governance. We talked about the models that might be out there, the frameworks that might be out there. But I was just thinking about this, a lot of organizations have an existing risk management discipline of some sort where
Okay.
they're
Yes.
identifying their threats and their vulnerabilities and their likelihood and their impact. How does that connect into data management foundations that we're discussing? Does it inform aspects of the data management? Does it help improve it? Does it change it in any particular way? I was just curious, you were talking about DevSecOps and some of these other kind of ongoing processes. How do you think risk management plays in this space as it relates to data foundations and data management?
Risk is ongoing, right? As I mentioned earlier, once we are connected, we are at risk, right? I just saw an ad that these days, right, is on the right. I've seen it a couple of times that green homes, that everything is interconnected. The fridge, right? Even my Christmas tree is interconnected. I have an app right now, right, to turn it on and turn it off. So that tree, that Christmas tree, is at risk. So it's ongoing, right? And we all have a responsibility to be aware that there are strong points, but there are also weaknesses and vulnerabilities. And it's our responsibility to always procure that we are have, right? That we are always refining, all right, fine tuning parameters and controls. I'll always be aware. Again, if it's interconnected, it's at risk. And we are dealing and transmitting data. And data, again, means money is a valuable asset. And that's the asset that cyber criminals and hacktivists, right, and malicious actors are after, right? They're looking for our data. And so we must be aware and protect it at all times, because the one of the examples, right, that I'm dealing with in academia is, and it's hurting critical thinking, right? Students believe that by using AI tools to support them, that they are completing their assignments, and they inserted their share, but in the end, the entire content is AI generated. And so not only presents a serious academic issue, but by uploading PII data into AI tools, they may be inadvertently disclosing company data. And circling back, it's important to be aware of what is presented or stated in the policy standards and procedures to make sure that we always protect, right, corporate data and PII data, demographic data. Did I answer your question, Jim?
Yeah, you did. Absolutely. Something else I wanted to kind of flush out. A lot of organizations today have what I'll call technical data initiatives. For example, they tend to focus on ideas such as, you talked about data quality, classification, governance, security. There's all of this kind of like oversight, if you will, that we oftentimes think about in terms of the data management and the data governance and so on and so forth. I'm wondering how those kind of quote unquote initiatives might actually, get balanced with ultimately the business driven requirements. Businesses have a mission, they have a purpose, they're trying to go somewhere. They're trying to generate revenue or enter new markets or service new customers. I guess what I'm really trying to go after is how does an organization try to balance that so that these what I'll call technical data initiatives don't become so burdensome that they impinge or they negatively impact the ability to meet its underlying objectives. I guess what I'm really trying to say is how do we align these kinds of technical data initiatives, quality, governance, with organizational needs? Are there processes, practices, methods that organizations can do to make sure that they're complements of each other rather than basically getting in the way? Does that make
Yeah.
sense?
Yeah, there are business analysis processes and exercises combined with the Lean Six Sigma discipline for continued process improvements, like conduct, right? Using the business canvas model is a one view where you conduct an entire assessments of the organization, right? Stakeholder processes. You work on a value stream mapping where you go further from the traditional workflow. You identify the metrics, you identify perhaps processes that are repetitive, like duplicates or not no longer needed. And by conducting those assessments, that it's time consuming, yes, but in the end, it's going to save you money. It's going to help you to improve. It's going to help you try to fine tune not only processes, application, but also data, right? And the use and to maximize the resources, identifying the potential gaps, holes, vulnerabilities, not only from the processing standpoint, from the operational standpoint, but also from the IT standpoint. So I do believe, right, using tools, quality tools for me, right, the fishbone diagram, the root cause diagram, it originally was a quality tool. To me is an outstanding security tool. The value stream mapping, business canvas model, value proposition model, right? So those are Lean Six Sigma tools that can help organizations, right, to restructure, to always look to continuously improve and fine tune operations in parallel with IT, right, with new IT developments. And in the result, not only we're going to maximize the use of our data, procure correctness in data processing, but also fine tune and improve, right, processes and services and satisfy our customer expectations.
A quick,
Yeah.
quick follow-up, Alton, before we move on. So, you mentioned Six Sigma. That's really kind of a quality control method, right? And so what I hear from that is, the organization should be thinking about quality control when it comes to
Yes.
data that then will ultimately support business processes. Is that kind of in a nutshell what we're talking about?
Yes, as I mentioned, data means money. Whenever I'm explaining the importance of having an incident response process, right, or a disaster recovery plan, business continuity plan, if you don't have a strong backup, right, backup and response strategy, or right, replication, redundancy, if you don't have the data to recover from, you're dead in the water, right? If you don't have somewhere to recover from, there are no operations. That's how valuable, right? That's the right, the power of the data. So we have to procure its quality, its correctness, and that's why I always say that these tools, right, like the root cause analysis, even the SWOT diagram, right? It's a quality tool, but it's also a very powerful planning tool because in one view, you identify the strengths that you can maximize, that you can exploit to the advantage of the organization. And the more precise that you are in identifying the potential vulnerabilities, the more precise and effective you're going to be on mitigating those risks in just one view.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Sandra, moving to our next segment, we're looking at our emerging trends and forward-looking insights, where we ask our guests to look into their crystal ball and make some guesses about the future. So, like,
Mhm.
we know that you've been involved with the ISACA's new AAISM beta program and its role in AI security and how that ties to your unique experience with data management and academia, teaching a lot of this stuff. So when you combine all of those together into a unique perspective, like how do you see in the near future the role of AI and data governance, unified data ecosystems, regulatory expectations that will come around? So we want to like talk a little bit about that. So starting on AI's role in changing how organizations manage and govern their data. I would like to get your perspectives on that. Like, how do you see that evolve in the next few years in terms of when AI gets uh, tacked onto everything that you can think of, imagine, and how that uh, impacts data governance and management for organizations?
I want to start by saying that we had a lot of work to do, right? AI is here to stay and it's not new, right? It has been around for decades. It's just that in the last couple of years, right, commercial applications have, right, emerged, but it has been around for a while. But right now, it's the same as in social media. We had a lot of work to do, right? The mastering for IT professionals. I do not believe on the forbidding the use of the tools. No, it's here to stay. And if we want to be successful IT professionals, we not only need to use it, we need to master it, right? So, Jim, you were teaching a workshop yesterday, so we need to continue to master it, right? To maximize the tools and make sure that it's being used on a safe and ethical way in academia and in the industry, because we need to be aware of what can we upload to write to chatbots, to AI tools and platforms, and what should not be uploaded or shared on those platforms. And those needs to be clearly stated in policy standards and procedures, and to constantly, right, educate, in my case, my students, but also employees, right, on how to make good, objective, and ethical use of these tools, because we don't want to risk compromising company data, especially those that are still classified as right, valuable internal data. We do not want to risk having those data sets or data repositories compromised or exposed.
Absolutely. So, one quick follow-up on that. So, when you think about like AI's involvement or it's just like adding AI into things, do you see that making things more difficult or easier when we think about data lineage, origin, and keeping track of things, data catalogs? Do you see that as a complicating factor or potentially helping with that process?
It is part of the learning curve, right? Whenever we're using a tool or a platform or even a process for the first time, it tends to be difficult. It tends to be complicated. But as long, right, as we continue to use it and refine it, then we get used to it, right? We get accustomed to it. So it's part of the learning curves, and that's where it is so critical, right, to be very aggressive in fine tuning as much as possible, right? Control structures, user awareness, and training. Because in the early stages, those are the risky ones. Right? If
Hmm.
inadvertently, right,
Hmm.
exposing data, sharing data where users or employees thinks that they're doing things right,
Hmm.
but they are not aware, right, of the risk that they are
Yeah.
posing, how they're
Yeah.
using, right, processing. So it's normal of the learning curve again, but it is critical to be aware that organizations needs to be proactive
Yeah.
and needs to be very active to mitigate those risks until we master the tools and we maximize the tools, right? AI is the same as when we,
Mm.
right, deploy a new application. It's the same, right? In the beginning, it's complicated. But as we move on and continue using them, then we get used to it and we master it.
Okay.
Did I answer your question?
Yep, that was helpful. Okay.
Okay, so building on top of that, in terms of the role of AI, we know that it's going to basically continue to evolve and it's going to, continue to present interesting challenges for organizations. Let's talk about this from the user's perspective or from the workforce perspective. What kind of skills or competencies do you think that cybersecurity professionals are going to need to either be developing today or in the future that's going to help them as these data ecosystems ultimately become more complex with AI and quantum and all these other different types of things? Any thoughts on the skills and competencies that we should be thinking about developing?
Yeah, again, never assume that the user understands, that they know. I believe that we should assume the opposite, right? That some of our users, they're knowledgeable. Some of our user thinks they're knowledgeable, but they're not fully aware of the risk, right? The risk they're posing by the way they're doing things, right? Transaction processing or services. So user awareness again is critical. Not only, right, traditional training, I believe drills should be part of the cybersecurity function, right? Like in marketing, we have the mysterious customer, the mysterious caller. So we should have the mysterious, right? The mysterious user or customer that could pose a threat to see how our users, right, to test the real knowledge and awareness level that each of them have, and from there continue to refine and again be very structured and be ongoing in making sure that our users and our customers, right, know how to properly use the systems and protect our data. Again, never assume, right, don't be too technical, don't go way too basic, but don't go up too technical that we could have customers or users, right, being scared of ask us as cybersecurity professionals, what are you talking about? What do you mean with this term or that term? So it should be defined and make sure we need to, right, clarify those terms to our users and validate that they understood. Same way I'm doing it, right? Right now I'm confirming. Did I answer your question? That those validations should be ongoing, right? Not only from cybersecurity, but from any professional as well.
Okay, so but let me follow up just to maybe clarify this a little bit. So you mentioned validation, you mentioned not assuming, I get that. But let's look at this from a slightly different perspective. What kind of knowledge do you think the next generation of cybersecurity professionals need to kind of be thinking about developing for themselves for the purpose of being ready for, how that data governance ecosystem is going to ultimately evolve? Does that make sense?
Yes, I do believe that communication skills is an extremely critical soft skill that we need to procure, right? And academia is working with that, right? Written skills, right? Written skills are very important as well, right? To be uh, something, right? Be short, concise, but very precise and clear. Be very clear, be empathical, right? We need to, right? Understand that some of our users will be receptive, that will embrace the new technologies, but we also must be ready to be also empathical and flexible with our customers or users who will resist change, who will resist using new technologies. So it is extremely important, right? Those soft skills I combine with the technical skills it's a critical combination these days, right? To soften, right, those users who will resist, right, embracing these new technologies.
Yeah.
Did I answer your question?
Yeah, you did. But I want to follow up. Well, I want to add another question, and then Alton will come on and ask one relative to that as well. And that is, like in the cyber world, we currently don't have dedicated data governance functions. Usually, that's sometimes done as part of information technology, or it's somewhere else within the organization. Do you envision that that might be something that starts to take center stage as information and data becomes that much more important for this organizational outcomes that we were talking about before? And if so, what do you think that those roles might look like?
That's an awesome question. Very, very good question and very, very real. Because when I was hired as a data architect, it was as a result of an IT audit. And one of the findings was that there was no data governance program in place. So these days, same way as I say that organizations that do not have active presence in the cloud, right? In the cloud or mobile platforms, right? Same way, organizations that do not have IT governance in place, data governance in place, even small business owners at least have some sort of control structures and encryptions, right? They will be way more vulnerable to attacks than those organizations who have a very active and up-to-date data governance in place. So this is the time to adapt, to embrace, and to deploy and manage data governance. Because again, is one of the most valuable assets for any organizations is the difference between staying the competition or going out of business. It's your decision. So this is the time to work in data governance, at least data quality and data security.
Yeah, absolutely. So following on that, you mentioned that the academia is helping with some skills. Like, how do you see the role of universities and the academic landscape overall, preparing students and next generation of professionals in these data-centric roles that will be critical to the success of organizations?
So again, the re-engineering, reinventing, redesigning the IT and cybersecurity curriculum to be more applied, right? With simulations, but also, right, also including, right, work on soft skills like oral skills and written skills, but going beyond the traditional presentation, right, to defend. It's like in programming and in cybersecurity, you are working on an incident, you need to work on a report and you need to defend it. You need to present it, and your audience will be executive management. So at the time of presenting, think of me not as an instructor, but as a CEO, as an executive management, and you need
Mm,
to justify, right,
mm,
the root cause or the action course that you follow and why.
Mm.
Right, so that we, as we are working with oral skills and written skills, we
Mm.
are mitigating other risk, and we are
Yeah.
facing where we're having code reports and even recordings that are AI generated.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we need to validate critical thinking, because
Yeah.
that is what the industry is expecting from academia.
Yeah. Yep. And for the like when we say data centric cyber roles, like how do you see the role of the technical skills in that? What kind of data analysis, data engineering, and those sorts of aspects that come to enable cyber professionals to make sense of data to provide real insights? Like how does the academia enable students with those capabilities if it does right now? Do you see any like can you share specifics like how can a cyber professional become more capable and competent in data analysis and like when they're presented with tons and petabytes of data, actually being able to analyze and make sense of it and then present real insights to executives. So because I mean, when we say like communication skills, soft skills are important, but if people don't have the skills to actually do the analysis in the first place, there's nothing to communicate, right? So how do you see the role of academia in preparing students for that type of competency?
Use the tools that are being used in the industry, right? Network management tools, cybersecurity management, intrusion prevention and detection tools. Right? In our labs, we're trying to use the same tools that they're going to be using in the industry to learn how to configure and how to effectively manage them. Because if they can master the tools from academia, by the time that they join the industry, they're going to be ready because they've used it already. And there are even programs that are right aligning not only the curriculum, but also right having agreements with industry providers so that cybersecurity alumni not only earns their degree, but also right they graduate with professional certificates under their belt as well. So having using tools of the trade of the industry as part of their assignments and their exercises, right? Simulating, right? Assignments with small repositories, but also using large repositories of data. Right, they start
Mm.
like in one assignment with 100, right, 100 records database, but then I switched to a 50,000 record database, 100,000 database, right? I cannot go further, right? As for terabytes or petabytes, but to simulate large data sets, data lakes, data warehouses, and how they could like deploy and manage those data sets by with the help of tools and technologies, platforms, and services. So the more exposed they are to the tools and the trades that they will see once they transition to the industry, right, the chances that they will be more successful will increase. Did I answer your question,
Yeah,
Alton?
yeah. So, okay.
And
Jim?
presentations are no longer presentations. You need
Yeah.
to defend it. You need
Uh,
sort of the elevator pitch.
mhm.
Okay, so let's go ahead and we've only got a few minutes left, Sandra. I thought maybe I'd ask to kind of as we're trying to kind of wrap things up, just a couple of follow-up questions for you. And hopefully we can cover them just within a couple of minutes. If you were to think back to, your career in IT, audit, cyber, and now data management, what's like one common misconception about data architecture or data management or data governance in cyber programs that you think might exist today that you'd like to maybe debunk or at least throw some cold water on? And any ideas about something that you see or read about that you think is kind of not necessarily consistent with the way things really should be done?
To start, team integration. Team integration is critical in projects, in cybersecurity, in operations. And this is most of the times, sadly, I might say, is overlooked. Right? Team integration and performance. Right? And that's why we're seeing CMMI, right, taking the perspective it has today, the maturity of the organizations, right, the continuum of operations. That is something that I experienced, right? Next year, we will mark my 40th year working in IT. And I have seen good projects, right, being shut down because there's a change in administration. That should never happen, right? Good projects, good operations, good systems should continue and be refined, not replaced. And we replace something that is not working. If something is working, you need to improve it, to continue to improve it, to integrate teams, right? To procure again the continuum of operation, the preservation of data, right? Not just because data is 50 years old may not necessarily means that is ancient, that is no longer usable. Think again, right? Again, we need to, and that's where governance is so critical at all levels. It's very, very important. Something that I'm also seeing is that not only data preservation, but the knowledge of the organization, knowledge transfer. That is not happening in all, right? In organization, that is not happening. And then we're seeing like the baby boomers generation, the Gen X generation that is retiring, right? So are we working with right knowledge transfer programs? Are we really working with rotation of duties so that it is preserved should an incident occurs or the employees depart or they are laid off, they are let go, right, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We must not risk losing that corporate knowledge. And something so basic is being overlooked. And then all of a sudden, we're going to find that we're going to need to start all over again when that should never happen. That has been one of my main concerns in my career, right? In state government, federal government, even in academia. So that's something that should be taken more seriously.
Understood. Understood. Alton, you want to ask the last question? Go ahead.
Yeah, very quick. So if we think about a small cyber team, like we talked about this hypothetical ice cream shop, maybe slightly larger than that, but still relatively small. What is the single easiest place for them to begin improving their data management? If there's one way, or just like one of the better ways.
So I will say reach out to professional organizations, right? Um, Reach out. I will not advise them, right, to go to Dr. AI or Dr. Internet, because the something that I always tell users and students, we need to validate. We need to validate data. Not everything that we are reading on the media, on internet, even on AI, is not necessarily right accurate. It's not necessarily correct. So we need to validate. But I will say that. To reach out to academia. Academia is also working on continued development, right? To professional development projects, programs. You do not need to take a full course, right? You can take short courses, right? And again, the news, right? Communities, they should be more proactive on reaching out to those in needs, right? Community services, nonprofit organizations, small business owners, right? We can serve to them, right? From the professional organization standpoints, even the news can be more proactive in educating. Not only right sharing the news of incidents or breaches, no, how to prevent them, right? Those are powerful media channels that could serve that community service that is in great need. Not only small business owners, but for citizens as well, right? So that will be my recommendations for academia, for professional organizations like ours, and for communication channels, medias, right? Newscasts, newspapers, right? Podcasts like this ones, social media. So we had a lot of work to do and a lot of service to provide to those in needs that don't have the means, that do not have the budget.
Absolutely.
Did I answer your question, Altan?
Yeah. Thank you.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. All right, Sandra. Well, we are going to end there. We have reached our time together with you. We want to thank you for coming on the Cyber Insights podcast and sharing your expertise and your knowledge as it relates to data governance and data foundations. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for the opportunity and honor.
All right. So that, as I mentioned, that's going to do it for today's episode. We again want to thank Dr. Sandra Fonseca for coming in. If you want to learn more about the ISACA Greater Washington, D.C. chapter, please feel free to reach out to the chapter's website at www.isaca-gwdc.org. You can learn about how to become a member. You can learn about a lot of the different opportunities for networking and education that are available there. With all of that, we're going to close it out and we will plan to see you at our next broadcast. Thanks a lot, everybody. Have a great day. Bye bye.